Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Jerome Myers. Hi, Jerome.
Hey, how are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Jerome, we're going to have a great conversation today about business exiting, which I know this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs have on their minds, but it's not about the exit itself. It's not the M&A and the everything that leads to that. It is really what will happen after. You know, you're selling your business. That's your baby. You created it. It's been your life for so long. And now what? What is the next step, the next chapter? And that's where you help owners to get to that next chapter. And you are an entrepreneur, a keynote speaker, you help businesses. Tell us about your story first.
Oh man, that could be a long story. I don't know how long the show is, but if we've got 3 hours, I can go through it. This is kidding. The high point is deciding to exit corporate America. So my last job, on January 13th, I was employee number 2 in the division. By the end of September of that year, I had 175 folks on my team. End of the year, we did $20 million in revenue, 30% profit margins. That was a wild ride. I talked to my leader every other week and I saw him once a quarter. And so for me, that was as close to being an entrepreneur as I could get while still getting a W-2. You fast forward to December 24th of that year, I get a phone call and it says, "Hey, Jerome, we're going to lay half the people off." And I was like, "What do you mean half the people off? That's not the right answer." He's like, "Yeah, you and I have been going back and forth about this for a couple of weeks, but I made a decision and I'm calling to inform you of that decision." Now, I'm pretty stubborn. So I was like, "Yeah, that's not the right answer." And we went back and forth about it. He's like, "Look, man, it's Christmas Eve. I'm going to go spend the rest of the year with my family. I'll talk to you in the new year." And so while he was spending time with his family, I spent the rest of the year trying to figure out who's going to stay and who's going to go. Because to go from 175 to less than 100 was not going to be fun. And I felt like just about all the people were critical to the mission. So we figured that out, put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and then made another run, another $20 million, another 30% of profit margins. But it was Thanksgiving this time, and I'm standing in front of the room before we go on break, and I say, "Hey guys, don't spend all of your money on Black Friday because I don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the year." And sure enough, my leadership credibility just kind of oozed out on the floor. I was like, "Man, this isn't right. The buck should stop with me if I'm truly the leader of the group." And so I decided to exit, and I left corporate and did what I thought I wanted to do when I was in college, which was build a real estate portfolio. And so we started out fixing and flipping and then moved into multifamily, built a few $1 million portfolio of apartment buildings across North Carolina, Virginia. And I realized that that was a really lonely journey. People only wanted to talk to me if they were going to find out when they were going to get paid their dividends, or a resident wanted to complain about what was going on at their apartment. And so I started doing some soul searching and I was like, "Man, like, what do I actually want to do? What do I miss?" Because I felt like things were going really well when I was doing the job in corporate. I was working harder for myself than I ever worked when I had a job. And it was almost as if I traded in my 9 to 5 for a 5 to 9. And I was making money and it was working, but it wasn't fulfilling. And that's the thing that I think most people miss is like once you figure out the money problem, how do you find fulfillment? And so I realized that the only thing that I missed was people coming into my office and saying, "Hey, we couldn't have done that without you." like just the acknowledgement that I was contributing and making a difference in their lives. And so I started working with business owners and helping them grow their businesses. The promise was to double their revenue, double their time off, and double their charitable giving. And we went through that and we had success with that. And eventually that got boring because more money wasn't the answer. It still wasn't scratching the itch of fulfillment. And so what we realized during that process, though, is that founders go through 8 exits. The first exit being leaving being an employee, and then is building a company, being a CEO. And then the one that everybody talks about when they talk about exits is exit number 6, which is the liquidity event. And I realized that on the backside of the liquidity event, everybody's asking the same question: how do I make my life matter? And so that was the space that I wanted to play in. And there's a whole lot that goes into that liquidity event that I don't think many people have spent much time studying or trying to understand. And so we decided to become the experts on that to help people make that transition with confidence.
Beautiful. I'm curious, what are the 8 exits?
Oh my gosh. So I don't want to overwhelm folks, but let's see if we can make it really simple. So the first one
Yeah,
is
let's
leaving.
name them because
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what they are.
Yeah. So the first one is leaving being an employee. So the exit from corporate is what we call it. The next one is like leaving frontline. So you become chief everything officer when you exit your job. And so you want to leave being chief everything. And that's the first CEO, right? You're CEO, but you don't have a team. You're CEO, you don't really have any resources. So it's like you're CEO of what, right? So chief everything officer is the next one. Once you're no longer chief everything officer, which is basically everything happens because you do it, you move up to the next level where you're basically like a product manager, right? And so you have usually one product that you're selling to the marketplace, and you're doing that, and you've got people doing tasks for you, right? So you're supervising those tasks to fulfill that product or service. The next level is when you actually become a thought leader. So it goes from, hey, we do this thing, to we have a body of knowledge around how we do this thing. And that is like the brand recognition. That's when you start having a promise and a reputation in the marketplace. And that's when you really start making money. Like before that, you're probably less than 6 figures. And now you're getting into 6 figures and starting to move into larger revenue ranges. Then you become the true CEO. CEO 2.0 is what we call it, right? And so now you have staff. You are still probably involved in the day-to-day operations, but you might have an operating officer who can get you out of that, or a chief of staff. And so we go through being a chief executive officer, the true CEO. The next one that most people skip is moving to becoming chairman of the board. So we believe it's very valuable for the person to get out of day-to-day operations, have a CEO in place or a president in place, them go to the board, run the board, so that they're out of the day-to-day operations. And this is the beginning of decoupling their identity from the business, because everything that happens before that is based on the will and the vision of the person, the founder. So 5 is becoming chairman of the board. 6 is the liquidity event. So, and while you're chairmaning, uh, you're unraveling your identity from the business. We then want to ready the business for sale, right? That's the whole point of kind of having the board. And then you want to exit. And so when you get the check, then you have your liquidity event. For most people, 80% of their wealth is wrapped up in the business. And so you want to extract that value. The next one, exit 7, is going to be the post exit portfolio. So, what happens when you get the liquidity event? You cut off your income streams. Okay, so now I just have this nest egg. What do I do with the nest egg? Do I just hold it and keep it forever? No, you probably want to generate some income, get some dividends. Maybe you want to buy real estate be a venture capitalist. There's a whole lot of options that people have, but the point is they're trying to create income from the cash that they have, because they know that they're going to lose when it's inflation, and so they're trying to recreate the cash flow while still having some savings. And then the last one, we call it PIL, is proceeds invested for a lasting legacy. So exit 8 is truly creating what we would love to call an endowed foundation. It doesn't have to be that, but we want you to put some of your energy, your time, and your treasure into something that's going to live on past you so that you truly can leave a legacy. And so that eighth exit is that thing being self sustaining and being able to run without you and it being funded. Because I think all the folks that do the nonprofit work are always struggling with whether they should be doing the actual work or the mission of the organization or raising money to do that work.
Right, right. How many founders do you find that they actually don't go and start a new venture, a new business? What
So
percentage?
I it would be difficult for me to give you a percentage. What I would say is starting a new for-profit venture, like a new business, is the easy button. It doesn't require a whole lot of thought from the standpoint of like how am I actually showing up in the world? Because that new venture is often, and I guess I need to caveat this, when the new venture is just trying to figure out how to bring more capital to them. For me, there's a difference between starting a venture that's specifically set out to solve a problem for a specific group of people that you don't think anybody should ever experience again because your personal tie to it, and just seeing that there's a gap in the marketplace and then deciding to solve that problem because you can be enriched by it. And so the latter
Well, it's
isn't.
similar to what you did. I mean, you saw a need there to help CEOs that are exiting, and that also fulfilled your purpose because before that it wasn't being fulfilled. Is that correct?
So the real estate, if we want to go in sequence, the real estate was not fulfilling for me, right? So my new venture was the real estate. So I started with fixing and flipping. I didn't really enjoy that, but it made money. It makes really good money. Then the apartments was the next thing. It was like I thought I wanted to do this, but I don't really feel like I'm making an impact. So that didn't make money. What I realized when I left corporate, when I stopped flipping, when I really stopped buying new real estate, or every time I sold a real estate project, was that I wasn't solving the problem that I was uniquely qualified to solve. I was going through what we call the founder's exit paradox every time I sold something or I stopped doing something that I put a ton of effort and energy into. And that problem was a problem that I wanted to eradicate for the face of the planet. I personally believe that founders are very special people. I think they're a little wacky because if you've got a 90% success rate at failing, right? 90% of businesses close in the first 10 years and you're still going to do it anyway. Like you're a special person. Now, for the people who end up being successful at it, now the question is, well, how do you take that uniquely talented, some people may call stubborn, other people may call delusional person, and make sure that they're not just put out to pasture or forgotten about or left to waste away after they sell their enterprise? And I saw that happening more and more. And so, yes, there needed to be a gap to make what we do viable, but the goal wasn't, oh, well, there's this group of people out there that um, we don't actually care about, and a problem that we're disassociated from, that or we hadn't even experienced, that we just want to figure out how to make money from that. This is very much mission work from my
Correct.
perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So you basically got found your mission and decided to act upon it and be involved in it, which is great. What do you think happens when a person sells their business? What is how do they
Ooh.
feel?
They go through what we call the six centers of doubt. Um, they lose certainty without a shadow of a doubt. And I think that's the biggest impact. When you've built an enterprise for 15, 30, 45 years, you've got a pretty good idea what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis. Your 40, 60, 80, 100 hours, whatever you're working, it's pretty predictable on what that's going to look like. Who you are as a person is pretty well set because it's your domain. Then self-image is the first level. The next level is relationships. So generally when people exit, they are going to struggle with the fact that 60% of the people that they talk to on a regular basis are going to vanish. And most
That's
people
right. The
don't
communication
understand that.
lines, I mean, the people, the communications, the people that you are, yeah, it's kind of like it's a void. All of a sudden there is this loss. We all experience it throughout our lives. Like, when we, let's say, graduate college, I mean, you have all your college friends. The day you
Mhm.
graduated college and you go back home and try to find a job, all those communication lines, I mean, you can maintain some of them, but they're going to go away, because now people are so busy in their own lives, and that group that you had something in common is not there anymore. So it's very similar to that as an example.
I think that's a great example.
Or getting
The
fired, like when you lay off people and they are so used to working with other people, and now all of a sudden nothing.
Yeah, I think the rude awakening for founders is they believe that the people that they've paid for a long time or that they've given contracts to or opened up doors for were reaching out to them because of who they are as a person and not their title. And they find out rather quickly once they don't have that role anymore that the people were interested in what the role brought as a benefit and not them as a person. And that's when their feelings get hurt. And so it's unfortunate, but it's a truth.
But that's the way it is. I mean, we're not going to have here like a social party with all of your ex-vendors because they have work to do.
But when your identity is wrapped up in that, I think it's very easy to confuse what the
Right.
relationship actually is. And so some people call it deal friends and real friends. And
Yeah.
most people spend their time with their deal friends and not with their real friends.
Right.
Then so level two is relationships. Work is level three. And so if you sell the enterprise and you're no longer doing that work, you probably have a non-compete and a non-solicit. You're not going to be in that industry for 6, 12, 24 months, sometimes even up to 3 years. And so what do you do with that? And so those first three is where all the stress is in their life. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times they start adopting behaviors that are detrimental to their health, things that they might have done uh, not as regularly may become more prevalent because they have resources in order to do it at a more intense pace. And so I mentioned that because level four is health. And so that's when people really start to evaluate their health and they wonder if they can get it back, if they lost it. They question whether or not they gave too much of it away in order to build the enterprise. After that comes prosperity. And we don't say wealth because we think it's bigger than just dollars. We think about treasure, energy, and time is having prosperity. And so, what do you do with that? You have more time, you have more treasure than you've ever had. How do you apply those? And then the thing that you are applying your energy to, you don't have that to apply it against anymore. So, where do you put that energy? And then the last one is significant. So, how do you make your life matter? And so, they move through those. We lay it out in that sequence because trying to solve a significance problem when you have a health problem just doesn't work, or if you're trying to figure out relationships but you haven't dealt with your self-image, it doesn't work. And so we help people move through those 6 centers of doubt in that order because we think it's the optimal way to solve for the solution without going backwards.
That makes sense. Makes sense. How do you feel about founders that sell the business, but then they still have to work in a business for a little bit, or they have to consult, or they have to be connected? How does that impact all of this?
I think most founders become very dissatisfied when they enter into a consulting agreement or an employment agreement on the backside. The new person isn't going to do it the way you did it. And so, if you had pride about that, if you have pride of being in control, you gave those two things up. And it's very irritating for most people to be in charge, be the final decision maker for 15, 20, 30 years, and then have somebody who they don't actually believe knows what they're doing telling them what should happen. And so I don't feel anything about it. It's totally up to them. For me, it's about their post exit experience and what they truly desire. And so if their post exit experience that they want is to have some income to do what they've been doing without the financial risk, then they should do that. They should get the job with the mothership. But if they realize that they are going to be frustrated by having somebody tell them what to do, or the people who bought it that thought they might be smarter than them aren't actually smarter than them, and they find that out when they're operating it and they feel like they're running their business into the ground, if they're not going to be able to handle that, then they should probably get out to avoid the stress and avoid conflicts that are unnecessary.
Agreed. Agreed. So should business owners start working on this 6 point strategy or 6 point or addressing those 6 points before the liquidity event, before step 6 or after step 6?
No, so we typically work with people in a 5-year band. So 3 years before, 2 years after. The preference, preventative is always better than reactive from our perspective. And we know that everybody that exits is going to go through the founder's exit paradox. So our preference is to work with people pre-exit so that their post-exit is actually by design. I watch so many people exit their company. And if you exit your company and you're like fully engaged and then you go to zero, right? If you go from I'm working 60 hours a week to I'm working no hours a week, it's like being in a head-on car wreck. Right. And if you didn't design that, you're going to be in real trouble. And so it's our goal to help them design the plan prior to them exiting so that they can step into the space. And the way we really like to describe it is we want you to exit to versus exit from. We watch so many people exit from their company and then they have no idea what they're going to do next. They don't know who they're going to be or how it's going to impact them. And it's our goal to say, hey, where are you exiting to? Exiting to is exciting, right?
It
Exiting
really
from
is.
is terrifying.
It is. Jerome, when you were saying that, immediately I had a picture of, it's kind of like you're jumping off a plane that exiting from, you're exiting from the plane, but exiting to is actually having, taking, like, let's say you do have to jump off a plane because it's still scary. It's still a decision. It's still a big deal, but you have, you took lessons and you know how to parachute and you have a very strong parachute. You have a guide with you. And most importantly, you know where you're going. So once you land with that parachute, you're not landing in a desert that there is nothing there. You're landing into a beautiful place where you have everything that you want.
It will. It will. It will.
Yeah, that's definitely the image I got. Well, Jerome, that's great. I mean, that's definitely a niche that is very needed. If people want to know more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, the best place to go is and so I think the best thing for them to do if they're thinking about their exit is to take our NEO assessment. So the NEO assessment is a 35-question assessment that takes about 20 minutes, and it will give you a 6-page report that is going to help you understand how you're going to encounter the 6 centers of doubt. And then it's also going to give you some suggestions on how you can find significance or fulfillment on the backside of your exit. And if you know how to do those things, great. If not, then we can talk more to help you figure out how to implement them. So the way to do that complimentary is to go to theexitparadox.com/assessment. And you can take that, get the report instantly and read through that and see how your post-exit personality is going to be impacted by the 6 centers of doubt.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Jerome, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. Your information, I'm sure it definitely hit home for many entrepreneurs that are contemplating exiting and knowing that they need something else at the other end of it. They have to exit to and not exit from, which is very, very spot on.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.